Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for our open banking panel on Verifier's accreditation journey. I'm David Engel. I'm the FinTech BDM at AWS. My role is to help to accelerate the growth of our FinTech customers and the FinTech ecosystem. And one of the main ways that we're doing that this year is by helping our customers through their open banking accreditation journey. As such, we thought that we would pull together a panel of a really interesting story about Verifier's journey to accreditation. And you can probably tell by the number of different companies that we have on the panel that it really does take a village to create an open banking data recipient. And today what we want to do is tell the story about the partner ecosystem that was involved in helping Verifier work towards their accreditation. So what I'd like to do first is go around the panel and give everyone a moment to introduce themselves, and then we'll get stuck into it. Helder?
Okay, my name is Helder. I'm CEO of DNX. DNX is AWS partner. So we are helping several companies in Australia to accelerate the cloud enablement, focus on DevOps concepts, high level of compliance and security, and moving towards a better and a faster delivery model. So that's basically what we do.
I'm Jill Berry. I'm CEO of Audit. Audit is a reg tech that removes barriers to companies participating in the ecosystem. With one API, our data recipient platform enables companies to essentially it has all technical and security requirements to be able to receive data. So ultimately they get all the benefits of participating in CDR and none of the burden. So we're purely focused on CDR.
Thank you. Alex?
Hi everyone, Alex German, and I'm a client solutions architect at Trend Micro, and I work particularly with customers who have needs around cloud security and in financial regulation space, and our role has been working with businesses around the accredited data recipient compliance piece.
Thank you. Lisa, to you please.
I'm Lisa Schutz. I'm the founder and CEO of Verifier, and Verifier, our mission in life is to give people access to their data to get better outcomes. So we're a card-carrying user of CDR.
Darren.
Yeah, so Darren Booth, I'm a partner at RSM, so it's a professional services firm and an auditing firm. So I head up the cybersecurity and privacy practice, and in relation to CDR, we're the independent auditor who's doing the assurance reports in relation to information security, and then sort of providing that assurance report through to the applicant, and then ultimately through to the ACCC.
Thank you. Lisa, we will start with you. So I think it's fair to say that you really are one of the true pioneers of Open Banking Australia, having been involved from the beginning and sitting on the Data Standards Board. What I would love to start with is really just understanding from a Verifier perspective, what is the problem that you guys are using Open Banking to solve?
Sure. Ultimately, our mission is all about giving people access to their data to get better outcomes. So we're using consumer data right data. At first, the first product to use it is the Safe Loan product. And that's where we help lenders provide a self-assessment survey for borrowers, which we can then reality check if the borrower wants against their banking data. And it's all about creating a financial wellbeing index. We work with the Melbourne Institute on this, and it's a scale out of 0 to 100. 0 is not happy, 100 is very, very happy. So think of it like a net promoter score for borrowers, but it's instead about financial wellbeing. And that's absolutely critical to supporting borrowers and lenders in terms of financial literacy, in terms of responsible lending and borrowing. And now coming forward this year is the design and distribution obligations of lenders. So as Jill said, she's a reg tech, we're a card-carrying reg tech as well. And so this is automation of lender compliance by helping borrowers understand their position better.
Thank you. And why have you decided to use open banking to solve this when there are a number of ways that you could get that data other than open banking? Why is open banking the best way to solve this problem?
Look, we're very vocal on our position on this. So we're all about consent-driven data sharing and the community's expectations around that. So when we launched Safe Loan, we were absolutely going to use the consumer data right. We wouldn't use screen scraping for it because there are so many arguments against screen scraping, and this is the safer, appropriate option.
Understood. And why have you decided to take an approach that involves this many different companies? Would it not have been simpler to keep it all in-house and do it with your own team?
Yeah, look, that's a really great question. And again, thank you, to everyone for being here and for the opportunity to talk about this. As you mentioned, we're certainly pioneers in this space and have done, and I personally have done a lot of work in terms of helping support the introduction of the consumer data right, because it is the right way to share data. And so I guess we always at Verifier have two hats when we do things. I mean, we are a tech company. We're a cloud native. We're a tech company. We can build this stuff, right? So yeah, the question is, why have we got all our partners here and talking about this village? The answer is there's a few reasons. Firstly, Verifier is known for human-centric digital first. And we're doing great stuff using this data. And frankly, I look at the strategic value of what my team can do in the space that we operate. Our competitive advantage and our strategic value comes from what we do with the data, not getting it. So that's the first thing. It's really just not a good use of our resources. But the second thing is, when you look at it, even if you thought you had nothing better to do, you'd have to really think about it in the sense that this is an evolving regime. The standards are constantly changing. So it's not a build and forget. So if you want to just brutally look at it on a cost basis, it doesn't stack up. If you as a tech company, you're obviously going to have better uses for your resources than something that's not competitive. And then just practically, there's time to market as well. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of very founder, CEO, I report to my board, and that's how I justify it. Now I whack my sort of kind of industry advocacy kind of hat on and go, at the same time, the other side of it is it makes CDR accessible, this ecosystem approach, and it makes it achievable for even smaller companies. And so I guess the other side of it is that Verifier very deliberately went around to find the right partners to get this done and to make a big fuss about it and do panels like this so that everyone knows exactly how we did it, so they can copy us, hopefully, mercilessly.
Great. Yeah, I mean, if we put in the way that AWS thinks about it, what you're doing is removing all the undifferentiated heavy lifting around compliance and infrastructure and allowing yourself to really focus on delivering on behalf of your customers.
Yeah, and just on that, I think the other handy hint for anyone looking at build versus buy kind of would be, don't underestimate. I mean, my view is it's a third tech, it's a third compliance, and it's a third user journeys within your own systems. So don't underestimate. You'll be busy anyway getting accredited. Why add this to it?
Great. And Jill, AdaTree has been working with Verifier for almost the duration of their journey. Can you talk about how you got involved with Verifier and the role that AdaTree plays in their solution?
Yeah, definitely. So AdaTree has been working with Lisa Verifier since October 2019. So we've been in this together for a while. So basically in June 2019, we started building out the data recipient platform. Our background is banking. The technical and security requirements are pretty much copied and pasted of what it takes to build a bank. So the barriers are really, really high. So totally agree with Lisa's responses about just like the technical complexity, and really it doesn't really bring you that much of a competitive advantage, honestly, to build it yourself. So we were building it out, and in October, the first 10 data recipients were announced by the ACCC to test alongside the major banks for the go live. And then so we knew that we wanted to work with one of them to essentially be their CDR partner. I ended up getting connected with Lisa, and really quickly, I loved her use case, and we basically talked about our value proposition and essentially how we would work with them and take away so much of the technical complexity. So ultimately, it worked out really well that, so we were, we were very open to be their CDR technical partner, that we essentially went in the trenches, did a lot of the early testing, in the working groups with, alongside Verifier in the work to the open banking go live. It was a lot of essentially grunt work to get this going, but it also really showed that we have, a tested, scalable platform that was ready to go. So that's essentially how we've been working with Verifier. together, just hand in hand to get the CDR up and running.
Thanks. And Lisa, we all know that consent really is at the core of data recipient. Was there ever consideration within Verifier to build your own consent management service? Did you look at that, or did you immediately know that that was something that you would want to partner with someone like AdaTree to deliver that particular component of your open banking solution?
Yeah, I think we always felt that this was infrastructure, and just like there's specialization in DevOps and cloud, we didn't see this as something that we needed necessarily to do, but we did anticipate having to do it because, you know, until we were introduced to Jill, we didn't know that there would be going forward any opportunity. And so for the ACCC, when we were one of the system testers, we were DIYing. And so, you know, it was great to have technical partnership and then progress that to actually be able to get them to do the heavy lifting. So, we did contemplate DIY, but it just didn't look appealing to us. Now, remembering again, and this is a handy hint for people thinking about it from their own point of view, remembering that once we've got the data, we still have to account for our use of it. And so there is a piece of consent management we have to do, which is, we got it for this purpose and that's the purpose we used it for. That's in our system. So we still do part of the consent process, but not the bits that are ubiquitous.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice flow in terms of, you know, talking about the move from consent, which obviously AdaTree is looking after, to then infrastructure, which is building your own infrastructure, how you're going to store the data, how you're going to leverage AWS's cloud capability to actually deliver the solution beyond consent. So I'd hand over to Helder, and if you can just explain how you fit in to the open banking ecosystem as it relates to Verifier solution.
No, sure. Yeah, we engaged Verifier and AdaTree. I think was a really interesting project, the first one on the open banking. So we really try to understand AdaTree's technical stack as well, and the requirements, and also Verifier technical stack and the requirements. So we had several sessions with Verifier and AdaTree team. We set up a roadmap, try to understand the compliance level, okay, that we had to get. We also use Trend Micro as well for the ongoing compliance check. So, and then we combine that in a project to try to create a solution out of this. I think that's the big idea. So we create a baseline, a compliance baseline on AWS. We can say a turnkey infrastructure solution, okay, for open banking out of this. So the whole infrastructure, all the automation, all the continuous delivery process, all the security, and also the continuous compliance environment. So in a box. So that's the output of a project like that. And when we engaged the Verifier, we set the definition of done. The definition of done is we are going to engage with you throughout the process, not only go there, deliver, and go away. No, we are going to help you and also adjust according to the audit's response. And I think we're still working together on that, and be really committed to get the accreditation. So that's the target for everyone, to get the accreditation. Not only going there and build the infrastructure, but also be focused on the customer.
Yep. And when we talk about accreditation, obviously there's going to be an audit component to that. Darren, can you give an overview, please? I mean, first of all, a little bit about your role in this, but then also about the audit process and what an aspiring data recipient needs to consider as they go really from the beginning of the journey right through to accreditation.
Yeah, sure. And I suppose sort of our focus is very much on the security side of things. There's a whole pile of other parts in relation to accreditation. You know, there's you've got the insurances, you've got the fit and proper, but our part is really around making sure that from a security perspective, you know, the ACCC and the consumers ultimately have comfort that the organizations that are getting accredited are going to be you know, treating that data with the right respect that is due, and really making sure that it's secure. So the audit that we do is really all around ensuring that the organization has thought about security, not just from a check-the-box approach, from a technical perspective, but there's also a lot of governance arrangements as well. So we sort of split it up whenever we're talking to organizations, both from a infrastructure layer, which is probably about sort of 50% of the control requirements, to sort of a little bit on the product side of things, and then sort of enterprise or governance type controls, which are probably sort of, about 45% of the requirements. And really, our role, where I think from a lessons perspective, what we've learned, we've now done 4 of them, is really to get in as early as possible to make sure that the path and the journey that the organization is going to go on is going to be compliant from the start. And really where that sort of involves is getting in early to talk about what the design is, what the use case is, and fundamentally, is that going to be compliant? Because there's a plethora of nuances in CDR, and I think even though you've got everyone here who are sort of subject matter experts, there are so many difficult technical issues in relation to CDR that each person has a role, in that end-to-end process to sort of give their insight and really sort of help ensure that ultimately you get a compliant and a product that is useful and manageable at the end. So really, I think sort of for me, it's around ensuring that you're engaging early with the right people who've done it before and know the difficulties in relation to CDR. And really, from a security perspective, realizing that CDR is probably a best practice framework. So it pulls together PCI DSS, the Australian Government Essential 8, CPS 234, ISO 27001. So you really need to understand all those and data privacy, which is separate to security, to really sort of come up with actually how do you comply. And really our role is to make sure that at the end of it, there's the assurance report that can be provided that sort of gives that comfort, and that ultimately the applicant does comply with all the requirements that are there.
And Darren, you've seen both sides of the coin. So you've been with some of the data recipients from the very beginning of their design. You've also had examples of where you've come fairly late into the process and had to clean up messes or clean up mistakes that have been made along the way. In terms of that early engagement, can you talk a little bit about the obstacles that engaging early will help people avoid? Whether it's around setting boundaries for the architecture, use case design, things like that.
Yeah, so I see CDR as one of the key things is the data architecture. That's one of the key things to work through, is where is the data coming into and where is it going? And it's not just the CDR data, it's the derived data as well, which is just an absolute minefield in relation to how sort of CDR, anything it touches is essentially now contaminated with the rules, and therefore wherever that data goes now also has to be secure in line with the requirements. So if you take one of the examples, so one of the audits that we did do, we came in very late in that piece. So essentially the organization had done a lot of work. They sort of said to us, right, we're ready to get compliant. We want to get compliant in 4 weeks' time. Let's go. I'm like, well, okay, let's see how we get. It ended up taking 12 weeks. And the reason being that every time we started to do something, we realized that they had a fundamental flaw in one of the assumptions that then meant they then had to go back, re-architect what they're doing, or go out and buy a new piece of technology and implement that technology because they hadn't understood actually how the rules worked. And I think by engaging early, it doesn't change ultimately what you need to comply with, but what it does do is make sure that you're on that right path early and you're not wasting time going and doing things, building things, then having to rebuild them again. And I think really a lot of what I think we do is there's a little bit of an education piece as well. Ultimately we're here to provide the independent assurance, but if someone gives us a design that is wrong, we're going to highlight that and say it's wrong here and here. I need to go back and re-engineer it, and they can then go back with those learnings and get it right the second time.
Great. And obviously a big part of the audit is the 3150 assurance report. And Cloud Conformity is doing some really interesting work in that. So Alex, do you want to talk a little bit first about why Cloud Conformity decided to get involved in open banking, and then how you are supporting the data recipient with the audit?
Yeah, sure. So conversations kicked off probably over a year ago with yourself and AWS and with Darren at RSM about the role that configuration management would have in fulfilling the security requirements of the CDR rules. And one piece of that is the ongoing assurance program. And a number of our customers were already doing this in the space of, the likes of APRA, CPS 234, ISO 27001, etc., and running automated compliance reports across their cloud infrastructure. So it was a no-brainer for us to also provide for fintechs the requirements of the CDR. So we were able to really seamlessly add in an ongoing assurance report that could be automated, scheduled, and gives customers an ability to see what's happening within their cloud environment really quickly without a lot of sort of tedious audit process. And it's actually, part of those CDR rules around security require organisations to have an ongoing controls assessment program in place. And it calls out specifically that should be at the frequency with which your environment moves. And I know these guys will attest to the fact that their environments move quickly, especially in the cloud. So to be able to do that in real time, there's no better frequency to be doing your reporting.
Yep. And Darren, you've been really instrumental and worked very closely with Cloud Conformity throughout the process of them building the continuous assurance report for 3150. From an auditor's perspective, what is the benefit of having something like Cloud Conformity's continuous assurance testing in an environment or with the data recipient versus not having it?
Yeah, so I'll probably break it down into two parts. So one is the initial accreditation. So like I said, sort of the 50% of the controls that are at the infrastructure layer, the applicant or the organization can run the cloud conformity suite early. They can see themselves what they're compliant with and not compliant with, regardless of sort of us getting involved and trying to sort of work through and provide screen prints and review configurations, which are all very time consuming. The report will give the applicant that snapshot nice and quickly, and then they can sort of work through it and sort of get themselves up to a certain point of compliance using the knowledge base that is there. So I think there's the acceleration to get compliant on the build side of things. But then, there's then the ongoing compliance bit, and that's the bit that, for CDR is not a case of you get accredited and then you forget about it. You get accredited, and actually that's the first hurdle. You then got to get active, which is then the next big hurdle to do. And then once you're active, then you then got to maintain your compliance going forward. And really, in 2 years' time, when there's another audit then required, having something like Cloud Conformity, which is sort of shown over, continuously what is the compliance status, that's again sort of a big value proposition for an organization to be able to see that real time themselves, as opposed to waiting for us to come in and tell them where they are, where they're not compliant.
And one thing that I would add, so when we talk to customers about implementing Cloud Conformity, it's not just about the audit. Equally, a lot of our customers are actually using it for their board reports. So you can literally drop the report into a board pack, you show everything is green, and you're giving the board a level of comfort as well that any cybersecurity risks that could be as a result or any compliance risks are actually mitigated. So there's both the the accreditation upside, but equally for board assurance, it's also a really important tool. So I thought it just worth mentioning that. And I also want to mention, and in case there's any confusion about when we talk about Cloud Conformity or Trend One, it's the same company. So Cloud Conformity was acquired by Trend One. So forgive us if we're mixing up branding. just thought I'd point that out. In terms of, so Lisa, you mentioned before that obviously there's 30% technology, and then there's also the kind of policies and procedures and the non-technical components of it. Can you just talk a little bit about what that part of the accreditation journey is like, so that people can understand that it's not just about building tech, it's not just about passing a security audit, that there's actually an aspect of policies and procedures and internal processes that also are required to be accredited? Sorry, Lisa, it's 2021,
Sorry.
so you're on.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yes, it's very 21, isn't it? Yeah, look, if you think of it this way, I mean, it's there's lots of really great documentation on the ACCC website just in terms of all the checks, but think of it this holistically, and to Darren's point, what does the ACCC need to be comfortable about and confident about to know that the data is being handled in the way it is getting appropriate respect? And so I think the key bit is, fit and proper person, the company's and all the directors and key officers and people who are going to be involved are, reliable and trustworthy, et cetera, et cetera. Processes in place to handle disputes, an external dispute resolution body is involved. So we're a member of AFCA, which has increased its scope to handle these data sort of queries or complaints. The right policies are around how you're going to handle the data, being very clear with the consumer. What are you using the data for? So what's the actual use case? And I think the one I just tease out, which comes a little bit back to Darren's point about the kind of the CDR data environment, and privacy is not security. So I think the big shout out to people is really knowing you've got the systems and processes in place that you can account for the use of the data. And I'm just shouting that out because it's not written down in the technical standards for how to get the data, but it's a really key piece for your data governance. So think of CDR data, for want of a better term, as kryptonite. All right, wherever it goes, it's radioactive, and so you really need to be able to explain what you're doing, and that's going to take something for everyone, because even if you've got all the right infrastructure and you're partnering with your village to get the job done, you're still going to have it go through your actual, where you have the strategic value is in your user journey and what you're doing with it, and that's still part of it, if that makes sense.
Sure, thank you for that. And I think it's also worth mentioning that Audit as well has received their accreditation now, so Jill's gone through this process as well. Do you want to talk briefly about the lessons that you learned through the process now that you guys are an accredited data recipient?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of learnings, but luckily the more that we learn, the easier it'll be for other people in the future. So I'm very happy to share that. One, I can't emphasize with Lisa and Darren enough, think about your use case, think about where the data is, the CDR data, but the derived data in the insights. Once you have that sorted, then your life gets a bunch easier going forward, because it could trip you up at the end and be a bit of a rock. So definitely establish that and have a plan up front for sure. I think so that one's really important. Also, once you're accredited, that's a very big milestone in itself. But also, once you're accredited, you actually can't receive data yet. So it means that you have the audit, a lot of policies and processes, and some very secure laptops with some controls. So ultimately, you have to have a plan of how can you go from accredited to active as fast as possible. Of course, that's what the whole end game is. So just thinking about how are you going to manage consent. It's not a one-off. How are you going to maintain all of that? So, that's something that Audit does, but so, would definitely recommend thinking about that. That's really important. But also, just thinking about there's a fair amount of media in it, about the accreditation, about how it's actually really hard to do. But we're the first startup to get accredited, and we did it in just over a month while we're doing cap raise, hiring, implementation, BAU, all other things. So it's actually really doable because we use cloud conformity. It was a no-brainer for us. It made our life much easier. We used Darren. He was an excellent external auditor for us. It's getting people around you who know what they're talking about, because you can dive as deep into CDR for literally years and still not know what you're doing. So just surround yourself with the subject matter experts in it, and they will make your life a lot more efficient and easier. So then you can, because the whole end goal is how can you bring these use cases to life and bring better outcomes to consumers and businesses. So that's what you really want to focus on. So if you pick the right partners along the way, I feel like your life will just be a bit more efficient and easier. So that's what I'd recommend for accreditation.
Great, and I think good reminder that even though we're very focused on compliance and accreditation as most of the ecosystem, obviously really this is about the consumer and bringing increased competition and enabling innovation. So why don't we finish just on your thoughts, Jill, and Lisa, I'll hand over to you as well. What do you think the kind of innovation opportunities are, and not necessarily the kind of pie in the sky 5 years out, but what are the near-term opportunities that you think are going to benefit consumers with open banking now that it's live?
Absolutely. Yeah, we love to talk about different use cases across industries, and there's realistically going to be more shorter term ones. So I think that one of the biggest impacts will definitely be to lending and customer onboarding. The idea of getting rid of bank statements and sharing anything manually, having like a conditional offer for a home loan in a minute. How can you actually do that? And using open banking to power credit decisioning, credit monitoring, credit engines, thinking of, that's actually the new credit scorecard. And I think that actually isn't far-fetched. Putting that into credit decisioning, I think that's really actually in the short term. And of course, some of the other use cases that are going to be brought to life sooner will be probably around like customer insights, personalized offers, and really sharing your data to find out what products are actually suitable to you. So looking at, say, comparison sites, brokers, there's huge benefits for both the business and consumers in that space. But I love to talk about, CDR for good and how it can impact government, energy, insurances. But I think that in the next year, those are the ones that you're really going to start to see.
Great, and I think, Lisa, that's a really good segue to you. Obviously, you started Verifier for the purpose of increasing financial well-being for consumers. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you expect to see in the near term as it relates to open banking use cases that you think will be in market?
Well, certainly from our point of view, I agree. The near-term use cases are all about switching and competition, right product and all of that. I mean, what we're doing with Verifier's tools is more around supporting the industries, the incumbents to support their borrowers. So there's for instance, we're plugging the Safe Loan into our hardship toolkit, which is an end-to-end automated assessment. If you think about moments in people's lives, and especially in this weird COVID time we're in, hardship applications is historically a completely manual process. So, it's a real opportunity and privilege to be able to take the smarts from onboarding and port it into a place that people really need it. And teams really need it. So there's a lot of burnout in the customer service teams at the moment, and that also can be fixed. But then going forward, I guess I can't not say the obvious, which is CDR is a cross-sectoral view of rewiring the data sharing in the economy. And so where I'm excited is things like financing solar panels for a sustainable future. And, when the energy companies are using bank data to streamline, and maybe it's insurance next or super or whatever. So I guess I have my eye on that part as well, the longer run.
Great, thank you. Look, thank you everyone for participating. I think that this really is the best example that I've seen in market of a true kind of cross-collaborative experience and project to help get accreditation for really one of the pioneers of open banking. So again, thanks everyone for joining. I'm sure everybody on this panel would say feel free to reach out to anyone in the audience who wants to know more about this. Obviously, I'm happy to have a chat about it as well. As I said at the beginning, our goal is to accelerate accreditation journey for all of our customers in the ecosystem. So you've really got a great panel of people here who are happy to help you on your journey. Thank you.